Welcome back to Joe's Motoventure. So if you tuned in a couple weeks ago, I disassembled the entire fairing on my 24 Road Glide and had some parts sent off for paint. If you missed that, I'll put a link in the description below. I went into detail on how to disassemble everything, what tools were needed. Today I'll be putting it all back together. I'm not going to dive into as deep of a detail, so if you need to see that or you want to see that, make sure you check that video out. Today I'm just going to get it all put back together and I'll show you the final product. Alright, so here I've got all the parts. I had the inner fairing painted Vivid Black, which is Harley's Gloss Black. So we've got the inner fairing there. The vent cover and trim pieces. There's some fingerprints on it just from handling. That'll all get cleaned up at the end. The glove box doors, speaker grills, windshield brackets, and the nacelle that goes around the risers. I'm going to start with the nacelle just because it's a lot easier without the fairing on here. So whenever I'm putting parts like this together, I like to get everything started first, just because there's a lot of pieces that need to line up. So I get all the hardware in and started, and then go through and tighten it all down. Don't want to forget the little keyhole cover. Just snaps into place. All right, I'm going to start reassembling the inner fairing here. Got a nice furniture pad laid out. Obviously, it's all fresh paint. I don't want to scratch it. So it's got the little door catches. They just snap into place. And then these captured nuts clip on here. And then these vents just have 3 screws to hold them on. All right, if you watched my disassembly video, you saw me using a power ratchet to take everything apart. I'm not going to be using that to reassemble. A lot of this hardware screws into these brass fasteners that are molded into the plastic fairing and other plastic parts. And so that thing has way too much torque, and you can risk like kind of blowing that plastic out where that's molded in. So reassembly is just going to be hand tools. That thing's fine for disassembly. You know, I broke everything loose by hand and then ran the power ratchet. So there's really nothing to worry about there. So I'm ready to hang this main bracket back on here that holds the stereo and amp. All right, we're ready to hang the fairing back in place. Just got to feed these cables through. Just 3 connectors here that need to feed through here. Trying to be careful not to bump into anything with this fairing. And then it actually has tabs that kind of hold it in place. But right here, there's that tab hanging down, and there's one there. And from the top here, you can kind of see them. It goes down through that slot there. There's another one there. Then up inside here, there's this metal tab that comes through this big slot in this main bracket. So when you're taking it off or putting it back on, once you get these 4 bolts out, it will sit there on its own, and then you can go set your stuff down, grab your tools, whatever you need to do. I have a couple things left to reassemble on the bench here. I need to put the covers on these doors, and these just simply slide into place. They're that easy. I gotta put the gaskets back on these speaker grills. There's these 2 like H-shaped windows. Those go around these 2 clips. And then there's 2 small little windows here, and those go around these bottom posts on the grill. And then everything else will just kind of fall into place. If you saw in my other video, I talked about how there was a little bit of adhesive holding this edge in. As far as I could tell, you don't really need to put anything else in there. There's these pressure fit pieces that go down in these little windows, and it's holding fine. Once it's on the bike, it's going to be, held in place with the pressure of these clips holding it in. So I think that's fine as it is. All right, I'm ready to reassemble everything on the fairing now. It's all pretty straightforward. We'll get the glove box doors on first. The next up is the actual glove boxes themselves. You have to kind of work it around this lower fairing bracket a little bit. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but once you get in there, it'll fall into place. It's pretty good timing on all this. This weekend we have our first of the year Cars and Coffee event, which, if you're from the Southern Maryland area, you'll know is a very big event. There'll be thousands of vehicles there. And a guy I went to high school with actually puts it on. He owns a company called ProGloss Auto Solutions, and he does top-notch detailing. So if you're in the area, make sure you check him out. And it's a great event. So my wife will be taking the R7. I'll be taking this, obviously. It's 2 days from now, so this worked out really nice to get this all in and have the bike looking a little bit better this year. So once you get both glove boxes in, if you pulled the USB cable the way that I did, you're going to want to get that rerouted before you go any further, because once your speaker pods and all are in, you're not going to be able to get to it. So I'm not going to plug that in just yet because there's a couple other things that'll be in the way of, but it's in place and routed. So we can go ahead and continue assembly. The next up is the speaker pods. The right side has this GPS antenna. It's just this square chunk right here. The left side has the big circuit board antenna that wraps around the pod. It's an easy way to tell the difference on them. So we want to feed this speaker connector through the frame here. And then the GPS antenna cable goes over the frame. And there's 7 bolts that hold each of these on. So make sure you get them all. A couple of them are in little hidden spots. Again, you want to get everything loosely installed as you put each piece on, and then go through and tighten everything up, because you're going to have to wiggle this thing around a little bit to get your all your bolts lined up. The same thing for the left speaker pod. Your actual speaker connector goes through this gap here, and then the antenna cable just sits over top that frame. All right, now that the speaker pods are in, everything is here to be plugged in with the exception of the headlight. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything hooked up, There's a few connections that have to happen before the headlight goes on. And then we'll put the headlight on, and then we're ready to put the outer fairing back together. On the back of the stereo, there's two blue connectors. And then you've got the white connector for the stereo antenna and the blue connector for the GPS. So the white goes on the bottom. They're both the same style connector, but they have different keyways in them. So just pay attention to that if you put that back together. Don't try to jam it on there. They should just clip right into place. And we've got the USB cable. We've got both the speaker connectors, which they plug in, and then they get pushed up into these tabs. I've got the amp connector that I disconnected to get to one of the bolts easier. If you disconnect that, make sure you push that red tab back in that locks it into place. So that's everything up top, and then down bottom here, you have these two connectors that plug in over here. They feed through this little triangular slot in that bracket. And then I'll just throw a couple zip ties on this USB cable, and then we're ready for the headlight. All right, when you put the headlight back in, make sure you have one of the bolts handy. This thing is actually pretty heavy, and there's nothing that really holds it in place without the bolts. So you don't want it hanging there and walking away to grab bolts and all. There's 6 bolts to hold this in, 2 up top here, 2 on the bottom, and then there's 2 back in these little holes, so don't forget about those. All right, the fairing's ready to go back on. So when your fairing slides on, there's like an interface here in this corner, and then one down here that needs to slide into the inner fairing. So make sure all that's lined up when you put it together. All right, so then we're ready to put this vent top piece, whatever you call it, on. You want to make sure you get your little windshield brackets on here. And then it'll just rest there for now. All right, so I got this piece slid on. I went ahead and snapped the front cover on. Then I just need to put windshield brackets on. Then the windshield. All right, we're ready for the little side louvers. When you take these in and out, it has this piece that sticks out that goes inside the fairing here. So I found if you come below the fairing and just follow the curve of the tank, they'll slide right in. Okay, so now we're ready for the speaker grills. Like I said before, there's tabs that stick out of the bottom here that kind of hook down into the fairing. All you gotta do is get those lined up, then push in that outer corner, and then push in the upper corner, and they snap right in. All right, and there's the finished product. Obviously, I need to clean it. It's got fingerprints all over it, but I'll put a little before and after shot. I think this really cleans things up, makes it look a lot more finished. You can see up top here, the vent trim and all. I could have gotten this painted. I opted not to. I think a little bit of contrast is nice, and just not sure how well that would hold up over time, especially on this knob and all. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I'm super excited with how this turned out. I think it really finishes the bike off. Like I said, it was one of my biggest complaints with these new models from Harley, and not painting those parts. To me, it's just a little bit of cheaping out on their part, but easy enough fix. And as you saw, it's not as complex as it may seem it's going to be to tear this thing apart. It took me about an hour to take it apart, just a tad bit longer to put it all back together since I wasn't using power tools. But, you know, there's not a lot of connectors to take apart. I've taken apart Rushmore era bikes in the past, and they're definitely a lot more complex. I haven't messed with the pre-Rushmore like 13 and back bikes, but I've heard they're even worse. But they've definitely simplified things a lot on these new models. So if you're thinking about diving into it, I'd encourage it. It's really not that complicated. But again, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.